Hey guys, welcome to Casual Commander, the new name of the channel, now that I've completely switched over to Magic. So today I'm coming at you with my Zara the Enchanter commander deck for EDH. My first deck I ever played in Magic was a mill deck, so, I mean, I just always wanted to make one in Commander once I got familiar with the format, and as soon as I saw Zara the Enchanter, I guess I thought of mill when most people just think of stacks, but I got a bunch of different themes in here, but we'll just get into it. So obviously you got Zara the Enchanter. He's a 4-drop, Esper colors. Whenever he attacks, you go grab an enchantment that's converted mana cost 3 or less, put it on the battlefield, and then you shuffle your library. And he's got flying, which is nice. Okay, so our mana, I split mine evenly, and I only do basic lands, and some people may laugh at that, but it works just fine for me, and it saves you a lot of money. While a lot of people are like putting their lands in, their lands are coming in tapped, I don't have to worry about that problem. As long as you have decent draw power at the beginning of the game, it's not gonna bother you. So I got 13 plains, I got 13 islands, and 13 swamps. Uh, yeah, I always do mine this way, and because right now, first thing I wanted to do when I started building commander decks was I just wanted to do the 3-color decks first. So I split mine evenly in every single one, and right now I have 9 commander decks, and they all have 13 of each land. So yeah, that's it for that. Keeps it really simple and saves you a lot of money on your commander costs, especially when you want to make more than a couple decks. You really have to worry about cost for your decks. So we'll just do creatures. So I don't remember what the exact count is. I think it's like 31 or whatever. I'm not really gonna do all that. I mean, you guys can always count up how many creatures I say and of each type, artifacts, whatever. So yeah. So first creature, I'm gonna go from smallest to biggest as far as mana cost. So Ruin Crab. So like I said, because I thought of a mill theme whenever I saw Zara the Enchanter. As soon as he came out, he replaced Hedron Crab for me, and Hedron Crab was like one of my favorite cards for a long time. But whenever land hits the battlefield of yours, each opponent mills 3 cards in Commander. That's great, and I mean the fact that he's a 1-drop and he's got 3 toughness, that's good. Okay, so next we got Starfield Mystic, reduces your enchantments by 1. That's basically his purpose. The enchantments hitting the graveyard effect, that really never happens too much. Watcher of the Spheres, we run a lot of flying creatures in here. We got kind of a flying sub-theme. So reducing their cost by 1. He gets a +1/+1 every time another creature with flying enters the battlefield, but that's just until the end of the turn, so that's not that important. But reducing our flyers by 1 is nice. So new additions as far as things that I've added into here. Obviously, you guys have never seen this deck before, but I added a little bit of a zombie sub-theme recently. So he's one of the cards, Wayward Servant. Whenever another zombie enters the battlefield under my control, each opponent loses a life and I gain a life. Nice card. The fact that most cards like that are dealing with like a type, especially like something like zombies, a lot of times they want you to like, they have an effect of when the creature dies. It's nice that I don't have to sack my stuff. I don't have to have a sack outlet. Bruvak the Grand Delinquent. So this was like a $40 card, but as soon as I saw it, I was like, I have to have this card because anytime that you would mill, your opponent would mill a card, they have to mill twice that many, and there's so many mill cards in this deck. There's a few cards that I'm not sure if they're worded as mill, but I think eventually that Wizards of the Coast will eventually go through and rewrite everything. I think they already have for the most part, but there might be a few that they're missing or they need to reword at some point. But yeah, he's really good. To be honest, I don't get him out a whole lot, but when I do, I mean, it's almost game ending because it's just like him and like a few other cards or just 2-card combos that can kill somebody. That's something I want to bring up is that in Commander, a lot of people go like, well, mill's a terrible idea because you can hardly ever kill someone. You can, it's just how degenerate do you want to be? You can definitely kill people in Commander with mill. It's not that hard. The whole thing with this deck is that I have the ability to kill someone with mill, but I also have the ability to use what they're milling, and I can kill them in other ways. Like, mill isn't the only way we can win in this deck, and that's what I like about it. It's got versatility. We got Soul Herder because we have a bunch of creatures that have enter the battlefield effects, so it's nice to just be able to flicker them. Flickering is one of my favorite mechanics, so you'll notice that in a lot of my decks. Warden of Evos Isle, I think that's how you pronounce that. Once again, reduces our flyers by 1. That's nice. Brago King Eternal. I pretty much, any deck that I have that runs blue-white, Azorius is gonna run Brago just because I have so many, like I said, ETB effects for stuff. But yeah, he's great. Grand Arbiter. So I like this guy a lot. I mean, one thing I love is reduce cost of my own stuff, and the fact that he does that. And because this is like a stacks deck, a slower deck, making all our opponent's stuff cost more is very nice. Core Cartographer. This is becoming like one of my like a staple for me in white. Is just the fact that ETB, go search a planes, put on the battlefield, tap. White doesn't have a whole lot of like mana ramp, as everyone knows, so it's nice to have this. And like I said, most of the time when I'm playing this card, I have ways of flickering it, and that's the reason I'm playing it. So yeah, I like it. So like I said, zombie sub theme. So I used to run Undead Alchemist without any other zombie stuff. I would just like run him because he's got a good ability of, if your opponent would mill a card and they hit a creature, that creature gets exiled and you go make a 2/2 zombie. So, and then if a zombie would deal damage to the opponent, they don't take the damage, they just mill that many cards. So I used to run this card a lot, and then eventually I was like, well, I don't want my opponent's creatures getting exiled from their graveyard, I want to use them. But honestly, like, the amount of zombies that this dude can make with the other stuff we have in our deck is very nice. Winborn Muse, basically a propaganda or ghostly prison on wings, as we would say, not just legs, but she can fly. But yes, making your opponent pay an extra 2 to attack, that's nice, lets you live longer. Consuming Aberration. So when I first was playing this card, I did not, I must have just read it wrong. I did not realize it says whenever you cast a spell, each opponent reveals cards. I thought it was target opponent, so I was screwing that part up. But power and toughness is equal to the total amount of cards in your opponent's graveyards. It's nice that it's not just creatures or something like that. And then, yeah, if you cast a spell, they're going to have to reveal cards until they hit a land every time that you do that. So that's just a little extra thing that allows you to mill a little bit more. Mirko Voss, this was the original commander that I had when I was trying to do my first mill deck for commander for EDH, and it was just Dimir colors, obviously. I liked him, but I felt kind of limited, and I just always, I found that 3-color decks were just a lot more fun. So, I mean, this deck kind of went in stages. At first it was this, and then and then I ran Sultai colors trying to do that, but I noticed I kept I would never actually mill someone to death. I was just beating the crap out of them. So I was like, okay, I kind of want to switch it up. And then I found Zara, and then the light bulb clicked. But he's good. Whenever he deals damage to a player, they reveal that many cards to the top of their library until they hit 4 lands. You get a few attacks in with this. That's very nice. And he's a flyer. Thrix the Sudden Storm. This is becoming kind of a blue staple for me. It reduces all of your 5 mana cost or more cards by 1, and they can't be countered. And he's got Flash and Flying, which is all very good for a card that only costs you 5. Yanet, Cryptic Sovereign. So this is something there's also a little Sphinx sub-theme in here. So I like this card a lot, but truth be told, because it doesn't have haste, I don't actually ever get that many attacks off with it. But I still haven't found other cards that I'd be wanting to take this out for. So I really like this card. Flying, Vigilance, Menace, those are all great. The fact that when it attacks, you look at the top card of your library, and if it has an odd mana cost, you just get to cast for free. And if not, you just get to draw a card. Very nice. So this is a new guy. Zara Sand, the Trickster. The only reason we're using him is that last effect. Whenever he deals damage to a player, put target permanent from their graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. Very nice since we're milling everybody. Because we can flicker, and because it's a Sphinx, Azor the Lawbringer, when he enters the battlefield, each opponent can't cast instant sorceries during their player's next turn. That's so great in a deck that can flicker because, I mean, obviously people, to be able to cut your opponents off for instant sorceries for a 1 turn, that's great. To be able to do it non-stop and just be like, well, for the rest of the game, you don't have instant sorceries. Normally the things that are going to stop your flicker plays are instant sorceries and counter you and stuff. So it's very nice. They can't counter, I take that back. They can still do stuff on your turn or somebody else's turn. They just can't do it on their own turn. So their sorceries are really screwed. They can still, I guess, do instants on somebody else's turn. Consecrated Sphinx. This is an expensive card. I only have one. I'm only playing here. There's cards that, obviously everyone knows in Magic that are a little pricey. And I mean, I'm not going to bling out every single deck. If it's essential for the deck, I'll drop the money for it. But if it's something that oh, that'd be nice, but I don't need it, then I won't do it. Consecrated Sphinx for this deck, it's a Sphinx. I have a few cards in here that are making my opponents draw, so I get to draw 2 for every time they draw, which is very nice. Everyone knows how good Consecrated Sphinx is. Grave Titan, this is a card that I think maybe I tried at the very beginning when this was still a Dimir deck, and then I took it out, and then I just recently put it back in because the zombie theme, this thing makes zombies, it has Death Touch, that's nice. But yeah, just for that. Noxious Gearhulk, so I also have a little bit of an artifact sub-theme in here. So the fact that he is an artifact, a creature, and an ETB effect, and lets you gain life, so many bonuses for him. Honestly, I don't even think it's close. I think Noxious Gearhulk is the best Gearhulk by far, and then I would say second is probably Combustible Gearhulk. The other Gearhulks just don't impress me that much. The white one is god-awful, but yeah, he's a great card. Sphinx of Enlightenment, another Sphinx. When he enters the battlefield, target opponent draws a card, and you draw 3 cards. This is a nice little way of like building a little like political reform with somebody. So like, if you know that like, okay, this person's my biggest threat, and then you got another person that you're playing with that's like, okay, they could probably use a card to help us take down somebody. It puts you in good light, like in good favor with somebody, just letting them be like, hey, you want to draw a card? Okay, cool. Here, you can draw a card. Don't mind me. I'm just going to draw 3. Haunt of Hightower. This card has never left this deck. This card's great. Look at all the abilities on this thing. Flying Lifelink. When it attacks, that person has to discard a card, whoever you're attacking. And then whenever a card is put into opponent's graveyard from anywhere, put a +1/+1 on this thing. I love cards like this that are like, hey, every time a card hits your opponent's graveyard, +1/+1. We have a few cards in here that are like requiring, especially one, that requires a really powerful creature, and that's usually the way we do it. Unesh, the Cryo-Sphinx Sovereign. So this reduces Sphinx cost by 2. And then if this thing enters the battlefield or another Sphinx enters the battlefield, you reveal the top 4 cards of your library, and opponent separates those cards into 2 piles, one to your hand, the other into your graveyard. The main thing is reducing Sphinx cost. It's nice. And you get some draw power. That's also nice. So I just added this card in here. I'm playing this in another deck, and I'll show you guys that in the channel later. But Angel of Despair, just a nice ETB effect. Destroy target permanent, and it's a flyer, so it can reduce that cost, and it's an odd converted mana cost. That's the reason that's in here. Diluvian Primordial enters the battlefield. Each opponent, you grab an instant sorcery from the graveyard, cast it without paying its mana cost, and then exile it afterwards. Great card, especially for this deck, and ETB effect. Fleet Swallower, love this card. When it attacks target player, so it doesn't have to be the person you are attacking, you just pick anybody. They mill the top half of their library to their graveyard. It makes your mill play so awesome, so easy. Just a great card. And I love that, like, it doesn't matter. Like, they could have some big beefy thing, this thing's going to die. It doesn't matter. Love that they didn't make this, like, have to deal combat damage. It just has to attack. Love that. Magister Sphinx. So this is one of the cards that everybody hates when you play it, and I understand why. When it enters the battlefield, target player's life total becomes 10. And you know what's even greater than that? We can flicker this, so we can choose multiple opponents and be like, yeah, you lose, your life total goes to 10, your life total goes to 10. It's great. It has flying, so we can reduce the cost of that, and because it's an artifact, that's important as well. I'll get to that. Sepulchral Primordial, like the other Primordial, except he can grab a creature out of each person's graveyard, each opponent's graveyard, and then he also has Intimidate, but the main thing is the ETB effect. Sphinx Mindbreaker. I love this card. I mean, this card came out earlier this year, Theros Beyond Death, and this is such a great card for mill. I'm now running this in 2 different decks, and once again, I'll show you guys those other decks later. But enters the battlefield, each opponent puts the top 10 cards of their library into their graveyard. So good in Commander. You get so many, like, you know, like let's say you had that Haunt of Hightower out there, and you got 3 opponents. You just added 30 onto him. Like, such a good card, and it's a flyer because of the Sphinx, as we know. Last Sphinx is Windreader Sphinx. Whenever a creature flying attacks, you may draw a card. I don't know if you noticed, but most of the creatures in our deck are flyers, so that's really good. And then if our opponent's got flyers, we'll draw off that too. So yeah, that's a really good card. Okay, enchantments. So Heartless Summoning. This used to be a staple for me in like mostly all my black decks, but I've kind of had to be careful about it, about the creatures you control get -1/-1, because there's a few times where I'll have a creature that I want out on the battlefield that has only 1 toughness, and this will kill it, so couldn't run this in the decks that I really need those creatures. But this deck, thankfully, doesn't have any that are 1 toughness, so that's nice. Reducing all of our creatures by 2 generic, less to cast. So great. And I don't understand why more black decks don't run this card. They think that -1/-1 is such a hindrance. But dude, playing Heartless Summoning early, especially in a Commander game where like people are going to try to pop your Commander, it's just, hey, this is one less time that I have to pay additional cost for my guy, because this basically will wipe out the Commander cost for at least the first go-around. And then all your other creatures, we play a bunch of high mana cost creatures, at least like mana cost 5, 6, and 7, so it's really nice to be able to reduce them. Okay, so I'm going to go through a lot of these. I don't remember what the exact count is. I think it's like 9 for our Zara the Enchanter targets that are 3 drops. You can grab anything less than 3, but like I never grab Heartless Summoning, to be honest. Aura of Silence, you can sacrifice it, pop an artifact or enchantment, but if you don't want to, it's such a pain in the butt for your opponents to just leave this thing out there and increase the mana cost of all their artifacts and enchantments. So everyone hates this card, like when you play it, and I love that. Back to basics. So a benefit of not running non-basic lands is you can run back to basics and it doesn't hurt you in the slightest. And I love it. And all my buddies that I play with, they hate it. And I just tell them, no one's forcing you to play non-basic lands. You guys are choosing to do that. And if you choose to do that, I run this card just for that reason. Yeah, if you didn't see it, their non-basic lands don't untap. So you kind of have to be a little careful about it. You don't want to spring that too early. You want to wait until after they've played a non-basic land, tapped it for something, then you bring that out, and they're like, oh, crap. So that's nice. Ghostly Prison, the staple in stacks, especially Zara the Enchanter, costs 2 more for your opponents to attack with a creature. Phyrexian Arena. So at the beginning of your upkeep, you draw a card, you lose a life. So I'll just say this, like, this card works good in this deck because you can easily search it out, but in a lot of other black decks, people think this card's really that good. That 2 black mana cost can kind of be, you know, it can be, I'm trying not to cuss as much, but I'll just say it can be a bitch. It really can. Because I've had it in other decks where I really need to draw early and it basically did nothing for me. So, because I couldn't get the second black, and that's really frustrating. But in this deck, it's just nice to have an additional draw every turn. Propaganda, same thing as Ghostly Prison, except it's blue. Psychic Corrosion, this for me is I'm now playing this in 2 different decks because, like I said, some of the mill stuff went into another deck as well. But Psychic Corrosion, whenever you draw a card, each opponent puts top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. Now, there is a card, trying to remember the exact name of it. It costs, Peer into the Abyss. It's a newer card that came out like in the summer. You can buy, I'm not running it because my friends would literally like not want to play against this deck ever. But if you wanted to be super competitive, Psychic Corrosion, Peer into the Abyss. Peer into the Abyss is 3 black and 4 generic sorcery, and it says target player draws half their library and then they lose half their life. But if you have Psychic Corrosion on the field, you draw half your library. Now your opponents are having to mill twice as many of the cards that you just drew. So therefore they lose. They mill their whole decks. You could run that in there to be more competitive. I didn't want to win that way. I do want to mill my opponents, but something about that just felt really cheap. The fact that I would mill every single one of them all at once like that, really, really bad. Ristic Study, what a lot of people that are like, you know, that have been playing for a long time, whatever, they would consider this a blue staple. I mean, it is a pricey card. I only run it in just this deck just because it's a Zara the Enchanter target. So lets you draw cards. I mean, most of the time people, I don't know, I guess it's 50-50. Some of my friends really don't care about ever paying for Ristic Study, then others will always make sure they pay. So I don't know. It just depends. Sphinx's Tutelage. So this is, it's kind of like Psychic Corrosion, except you could argue it's a little better. Whenever you draw a card, you only get to pick one opponent, but they mill 2 cards. And if those cards share color, they keep going and they keep milling, and this keeps happening. You generally, like, if someone's playing 3-color decks, like, I understand if you have no choice, if like multiple opponents are playing 3-color decks, but if you have someone that's playing a 2-color deck, or even I've never gone against a monocolor deck, to be honest with you, but 2-color deck, that's still pretty easy to hit colors that match. Underworld Dreams, I added this in recently. I've messed around with this card before. I love that we get to avoid the 3 black with Zara the Enchanter. Whenever an opponent draws a card, deals a damage to that player, I'll show you a card here in a second that's going to let our opponents draw a lot of cards, and not in a good way. I mean, you'll see. But that's another card you could combo Peer into the Abyss with, and I mean, you would just kill them because you could target them. Anointed Procession. So this is new because, like I said, I added zombies as a kind of a sub theme. So we make tokens of this and we double our tokens, and that's nice. Angelic Chorus. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, this is like a white staple for me. Just being able to gain life every time I have a creature enter the battlefield. So nice and underrated. I mean, it's not like a amazing card where it solves all your problems, but it's nice. Painful Quandary. Every player I've ever played against a commander always hates this card, and I love that. I mean, like, I like when people hate my cards. I don't want them to literally never want to play with me again, but I do. I mean, the whole point, I'm not trying to make it pleasant for them. I'm trying to win. Painful Coronary, if they play a spell, if they cast a spell, they either lose 5 life or discard a card. That gets on people, and eventually, like, next thing you know, they're down to like 2 cards that they don't want to get rid of, and then they've just taken like 10. They've lost 10 life because they really didn't want to discard those cards. Sanguine Bond. So while this isn't a life gain deck, we do have multiple ways of gaining life. Noxious Gearhulk was one, and Angelic Chorus is another one that you just saw, and I know I have more in here, but I've never like gotten a whole lot out of this card, but I mean, it's just one slot in the deck. That's the great thing about Commander. I'm only giving up one spot, and it's an enchantment, so I mean, nice to have more of those. Whenever you gain life, target opponent loses that much life. There's a few ways in this deck you can really kill somebody with that. I guess I have gotten that before. I take that back. I have killed somebody with that. Sphere of Safety. Oh, by the way, I'm never going to run the combo, the infinite mana, or not infinite mana, infinite like damage combo where you gain life, target opponent lose life. When they lose life, you gain life and just never end. I'm not going to do that because it's just stupid. Sphere of Safety for this deck is great because we can pile up the enchantments really quick. And normally, by the time that you're ready to play this card, you already have like 4 enchantments at least. And so that costs 4 more for somebody to attack. Then if you have Propaganda or Ghostly Prison, that stacks onto it. So Sphere of Safety is a great card in an enchantment deck. So here's the card I was talking about with Underworld Dreams and Consecrated Sphinx. Forced Fruition. Whenever an opponent plays a spell, that player draws 7 cards. So let's go through it. If you have Underworld Dreams out the field, every time they cast a spell, they draw 7 cards. Yeah, they got 7 cards. They lose 7 life every time they do that. And because they have to draw for turn, they're basically losing at least 8 life a turn if they're planning on casting something. And then on top of that, we have Consecrated Sphinx. So if you combine this with Consecrated Sphinx and Psychic Corrosion, so I'll take that into, I'll walk you through it. So you have Forced Fruition, right? They cast a spell. So they draw 7 cards. You have Consecrated Sphinx. You draw 2 cards every time they draw 1. So you would draw 14 cards off them casting 1 spell. And then Psychic Corrosion, every time you draw a card, they mill 2 cards. So every opponent just milled 28 cards with that combo. It's really nice. Forced Fruition, it's an expensive card, but a really cool one. Okay, so here's a card that, like, when I saw this kind of made me want to do the whole zombie thing in this deck. At least a little sub-theme of it. So an enchantment, which is nice, that's what we want. When it enters the battlefield, exile all creature cards from target player's graveyard. Well, we're a mill deck, so we like that. Then put a 2/2 black zombie creature token on the battlefield for each card exiled this way. Alright, that's awesome. Zombies you control have lifelink. That's amazing. So once again, there's another card that can help us gain life for that Sanguine Bond, or in general just, hey, I don't want to die, it'd be nice to gain a lot of life. But this can make a lot of tokens for us. And so the fact they can make a lot of tokens, I think, is worth that 6 mana cost, and we have ways of reducing it. So I like that. And it makes zombie tokens, which is important, and Anointed Procession, we could just double those. Jet Medallion. So here's another thing about me. I run the medallions in every single one of my decks. That's like... So if I'm saving money on dual lands and stuff like that, that's where my money goes, is the medallions. I love them, and I'll never play a commander deck without them. So the fact that, reduce all your spells by whatever, by 1 of that color is just so nice, and it only costs 2. So Jet Medallion, Mind Crank. Whenever an opponent loses life, that player puts that many cards to top of his or library into his or her graveyard. I've never gotten a whole lot out of this because this deck doesn't like put forth a huge amount of damage, but I've gotten some cards from it, and Mind Crank only cost me 2, and I am going to try to do a little bit of damage with flyers, so that's nice, and then I can have them mill some cards. And if your opponents are attacking each other, also helps you mill. So the fact, if the card costs more than 2, I'd understand why someone wouldn't want to play it, but it only costs 2. Pearl Medallion, Sapphire Medallion. As far as the medallions cost, the Jet Medallion is the most expensive right now at like 27, 28 bucks. And then Sapphire is like at 20. And then Pearl's at 10. Ruby's like at 18, I think. It's gone up in price. And then Emerald's the cheapest at like 6. So Panharmonicon, because we have a lot of ETBs in this deck, obviously, Panharmonicon's great. And it's an artifact, which I'll show you here in a second why that's important. Conjurer's Closet. This used to be kind of a staple for me. I still love the card. I just can't put it in every deck, but being able to flicker something continuously at turn after turn after turn is really nice. Yeah, you only get 1, it only happens at the end step, but you can still get some great effects of that. It's a 5 converted mana, it's a 5 mana cost artifact. That's important. I'll show you in a second, like I said. Bolus's Citadel. So My play group is starting to really hate Bowl Citadel, and I don't play it in every black deck, but for this deck, it's an artifact that's important. And because you're running white, if you can never run black-white in the same deck, Bowl Citadel with Angelic Chorus can basically... Bowl Citadel by itself can win you a game, but Bowl Citadel with Angelic Chorus can basically win you a game because every time you play a creature, that creature is going to gain you life. So basically, you're canceling out the cost of playing creatures almost. Yeah, Bowl Citadel, great card. I'll let you guys read that. I'm kind of getting tired of reading every single card that I'm showing. Essence Harvest. So this is what I was talking about with why we want really powerful creatures. And this also can gain us life. Target player loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. I've won so many games with Essence Harvest. We talk about in a mill deck, if you can't mill everybody out, well, what are your other win conditions? Okay, so if I had like Consuming Aberration or the Haunt of Hightower guy, and like, okay, they got a lot of power and toughness, but let's say like, you know, Haunt of Hightower is flying, but let's say my opponent is flying, or Consuming Aberration doesn't have trample, and let's say they got blockers. Well, like, that sucks. But if I have Essence Harvest, I don't need to attack to win, and I gain a ton of life, which I've actually won a game by killing one player with Essence Harvest where they lose life, and then I killed the other player when I had Sanguine Bond by directing that damage at them. I've done that multiple times, so that's nice. One with the Machine, this is one of my favorite draw cards in the game. Draw cards equal to the highest converted mana cost among artifacts you control. Well, we run Bolsa Citadel, we run Conjurer's Closet, which that's 5 and 6 respectively. Conjurer's Closet was 5, Bolsa Citadel 6. And then we have a few of those artifact creatures. Magister Sphinx is a 7-drop. Noxious Gearhulk is a 6-drop. So that's really nice, the fact that you can always draw that. And, you know, worst case scenario, because I run the medallions, you might pay 4 to draw 2. I generally don't try to do that. I try to make sure I'm getting at least 4 cards out of this. That's why I usually try to like hold on to it if I drew this in my opening hand. But most of the time, it's not that hard for me to eventually go into an artifact that has more mana cost. So, but I love that card. If I ever made an artifact heavy deck, obviously you have to run that. It's a staple. Traumatize, I will never take this card out because it's so good. Just have one person mill half their deck. If you combine this with Brewvac, they mill their whole deck, they lose the game. Mind Grind. This is another card that when I first read it, I didn't understand how good it was because I didn't realize it said each opponent. I thought it was just one opponent, and I was like, man, that's not that good. So you Demir colors and then X, and whatever you put into X, each opponent reveals that many land cards. So they have to keep milling until they hit that many lands. So if you do X for 8, you're gonna get great value off this card. If you like can wait, if you can wait till you're like you're costing 10 to play this, basically, that's where you're gonna get the best value. Now, if it's late game and they don't have a whole lot, you can get away with like 4 or 5, but anything less than that is not worth really playing. And then the last card in the deck is Crypt Incursion. This is another card that we can win with Sanguine Bond. Exile all creatures from target player's graveyard. You gain 3 life for each card exile this way. That can save you in a pinch if you're like, man, I'm low on life, I need to survive or whatever. Crypt Incursion. Yes, you give up the creatures in their graveyard, which you may want to bring back with Sepulchral Primordial, but it's worth it to keep yourself alive. This is a great card. I mean, the amount of life that you can gain on this, I've gained like 60 life off this before. It's really nice. And then, like I said, if you have Sanguine Bond, you can just go kill somebody with the amount of life that you gain. So yeah, that's it for the deck profile. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I love Commander. Like I said, I've been playing, coming up on like the beginning of 2021. It'd be about 3 years since I started like playing Commander. And I mean, I've taken a few breaks here and there, but for the most part, I've been playing like pretty steady. So love it. And yeah, I'll keep coming at you guys with more deck profiles. Hope you guys enjoy the Magic content. And yeah, have a good one.